God helps those who help themselves might be the most quoted Bible verse that never existed. You've probably heard it in church. Maybe your parents said it. Maybe you've built your entire spiritual life around the idea that God only shows up after you've done your part. By the end of this, you'll see how that single phrase has quietly poisoned the way you relate to your Creator. That sentence comes from Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac, published in 1736, a secular proverb dressed in spiritual clothing, and it landed so perfectly in the American imagination. Work hard, pull yourself up, earn your keep, that millions of Christians absorbed it as gospel without ever checking. A survey by the Barna Group found that a majority of American adults believed this phrase was directly from the Bible. It became the invisible lens through which entire generations read Scripture. The damage runs deeper than bad attribution. This phrase rewires how you see God. It turns Him into a reluctant investor, someone who only backs winners. You struggle, you strive, you exhaust yourself trying to prove you're worthy of divine attention. And when the breakthrough doesn't come, you assume the problem is you. You didn't try hard enough. You didn't hustle enough. You didn't earn God's favor. That conclusion feels logical. It also contradicts almost everything Scripture teaches about how God actually works. Open to Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. Paul writes, "For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast." The entire foundation of the Christian faith rests on a truth that directly dismantles the self-help gospel. Salvation, the most important transaction in the universe, was completed while you were still helpless. Romans 5 verse 6 makes it explicit, "For while we were still weak, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly." While we were weak, the timing matters enormously here. God's decisive action came at humanity's lowest point. He moved toward you when you had nothing to offer. No strength, no track record, no resume of spiritual accomplishments. That's the pattern Scripture establishes from the very beginning, and it repeats across every major story in the Bible. Consider Moses, standing at the edge of the Red Sea, Egyptian army closing in behind. The people are panicking, and Moses has zero military strategy, zero leverage. Exodus 14, verse 13, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which He will work for you today." Stand firm. The instruction was to stop striving and watch God move. Moses didn't part the sea with positive thinking or a 5-step action plan. God parted it, while His people stood still. Or look at Gideon. God chose a man hiding in a winepress, terrified of the Midianites. Then God reduced His army from 32,000 to 300. 300 men against a vast enemy force. Why? Judges 7, verse 2 gives the reason directly. "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.'" God deliberately removed every possible source of human credit. He wanted the victory so lopsided, so impossible by human calculation, that no one could mistake who did the saving. That phrase, "my own hand has saved me," is essentially the theological version of God helps those who help themselves. And God called it the very thing He wanted to prevent. So does this mean you sit on your couch and wait for miracles? Here's where the tension lives, and where honest faith gets harder than either extreme. Scripture calls you to action constantly. James 2 verse 17 says faith without works is dead. Jesus told the paralyzed man to pick up his mat and walk. Paul ran the race, fought the fight, worked harder than all the apostles. Obedience requires your legs, your hands, your voice. The distinction is the source. Your action flows from God's power, through God's direction, for God's glory. Philippians 2 verse 13 puts it precisely. "For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for His good pleasure." Read that again slowly. God works in you to will. He shapes even the desire, and then He works in you to act. The wanting and the doing both originate in Him. Your obedience is real, your effort is genuine, and the engine behind all of it is His grace operating through you. A branch bears fruit, real fruit, tangible, visible fruit, but cut it from the vine and it withers in days. Jesus said this directly in John 15 verse 5. "Apart from me, you can do nothing." The branch works, the branch grows, the branch produces, and every ounce of life flowing through it comes from the vine. This changes everything about how you pray. The Help Yourself gospel produces a specific kind of prayer, transactional, anxious, performance-based. You come to God with your accomplishments laid out like a business proposal. Look what I've done, Lord. Now will you bless it? You're essentially asking God to co-sign a loan you've already taken out. And when He's silent, you assume you need a better proposal. Biblical prayer looks radically different. The psalmist cries out from a place of total dependence. Psalm 40, verse 17. As for me, I am poor and needy, but the Lord takes thought for me. Poor and needy. That's the starting position. The prayer that moves God's heart begins with honest emptiness, not a progress report. Think about the moments in your own life when God felt closest. Chances are, those weren't your peak performance seasons, they were the valleys. The hospital waiting room, the 3 a.m., anxiety that wouldn't let you sleep, the season where every plan crumbled and you had nothing left to offer except, Lord, I can't do this. Those raw, broken prayers carry more spiritual weight than 1,000 confident declarations. 2 Corinthians 12, verses 9 and 10, record Paul's encounter with this truth after begging God 3 times to remove his thorn in the flesh. God's answer, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul's response, "Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Paul learned to celebrate the very thing the self-help gospel tells you to hide. Your weakness becomes the canvas on which God paints His strength. This is where many believers quietly struggle. You've been discipled by a culture that worships competence. Admitting need feels like failure. Walking into church on Sunday with a polished smile while your marriage is fracturing. While you're not sure God even hears you anymore, the Help Yourself lie tells you to fix it before you bring it to God. Scripture says, bring the mess, bring the doubt, bring the half-hearted, limping, barely holding on version of your faith. That's the version God specializes in. The father of the demon-possessed boy in Mark 9 said, one of the most honest prayers in all of Scripture, I believe, help my unbelief. He brought a faith riddled with holes, and Jesus healed his son anyway. Your imperfect faith, offered honestly, is enough, because the power was never in the quality of your belief. The power was always in the one you believe in. So what does faithful action actually look like, stripped of the self-help distortion? It looks like showing up in obedience while trusting God with the outcome. Noah built the ark. He swung the hammer, cut the wood, sealed the pitch. But he built according to God's blueprint, on God's timeline, trusting a promise that made 0 sense to everyone watching. Abraham walked toward Moriah. Each step was real effort, real agony. And each step was surrender, trusting that the God who gave him Isaac could be trusted with Isaac's life. Faithful action is the widow at Zarephath making the last cake of bread for Elijah when her own son was starving. It's Peter stepping out of the boat onto water that shouldn't hold him. It's Mary saying, "Let it be to me according to your word," when the angel's announcement would cost her reputation, her plans, her entire future. Every one of these people acted, every one of them moved, and every one of them did so from a posture of radical dependence on a God who had already decided to show up. The prosperity-laced, self-reliant gospel sounds empowering. Take control, make it happen. God rewards hustle. But Scripture's invitation is far more costly and far more beautiful. Surrender control. Acknowledge your poverty of spirit. Let God be God in the places you've been trying to be God yourself. That's the invitation Jesus opens the Sermon on the Mount with. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom belongs to people who've stopped pretending they can earn it. Tonight, before you sleep, try something that might feel uncomfortable. Instead of telling God your plans and asking for His stamp of approval, get quiet, open your hands, literally, physically open them, and say, I have nothing to bring you tonight except my need. And I trust that's enough. Sit in that silence. Let the discomfort of having no agenda before God wash over you. That posture, empty-handed, dependent, honest, is the posture Scripture celebrates from Genesis to Revelation. God doesn't help those who help themselves. He raises the dead, He parts the sea, He feeds thousands with a boy's lunch. He builds His church through fishermen and tax collectors and a murderer named Paul. Your inadequacy was never the obstacle, it was always the invitation.